Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Digging Deeper moment number 246. The purpose of our Digging Deeper moments is to take God's Word to God's world, and we're so glad that you've joined us. So far in our study of the Gospel of John, or really the arrangement of the Gospel of John, what we've seen is that we've looked at the first two sections. The first section being from chapter 1, verse 1 to chapter 2, verse 1. And we've labeled that the 7 days and the 7 witnesses because John refers to 7 days and 7 witnesses about Jesus. And then in the second section of John, from chapter 2, verse 1 to chapter 11, verse 57, we see there's 7 signs. Jesus performs 7 miraculous signs, and there's 7 feasts. That's pretty interesting because John loves the number 7. Tonight we're going to look at the third section, and I like to label this the 7 days of Passion Week and the 7 days after, or the 7 days that follow. This is where figuring out where John divides his material really gets tricky, because counting days gets more difficult. But there's no doubt he has a number of days in mind. If we look at John chapter 12, verse 12, he writes the next day. There's that saying again, te eperion. A great multitude had come to the feast. That's the next day. In chapter 13, verse 1, it says, now before the feast of Passover. That's a time reference. And there's days in Passover. Chapter 19, verse 14, it says, now it was the preparation day of the Passover. So John is marking days. And then again he says in John 18, 26, and after 8 days, his disciples were again inside. And so we see that his focus again is on days. And the truth is, however, without knowing which day of the week Jesus was crucified on, it's almost impossible to be sure where to divide this third section, because the day that he was crucified on affects what is happening in these texts. And there's a wide debate over which day of the week Jesus was crucified on. And I'm currently studying it, and some of the verdicts out for me, and so we're just going to have to make some assumptions and do the best that we can. So as I previously stated in this series, the outline I'm giving you is my best attempt to date. So my outline has been that we've had 4 sections, and that the prologue and the epilogue are both included in the first and then the last section. But there's 4 sections, and what I've amended is where we begin and end those sections. So if you look on the screen here, I've highlighted in yellow where the change is. So what we have is we have the original outline, which I take letter 2 from chapter 2, verse 1 to 11:57, and to actually letter 2 in the amended to chapter 12, verse 11. And then I begin the third section in chapter 12, verse 12. I apologize for this confusion, but I said this is a work in progress, and this stuff is very complicated. It's taken me many hours to even give you what I've given you. So in this outline, in this amended outline, the third section begins with the next day of John chapter 12, verse 12. Again, you see the emphasis on the days. And this day records the triumphal entry of Jesus on Palm Sunday. And that Jesus entered on Palm Sunday, or a Sunday, is a common assumption. But I haven't retested that yet. And anytime I do a teaching, I retest assumptions that I previously held, or I try to make sure they're not building on a faulty foundation. But that test is going to have to wait for another series as well. So we're going to assume that Jesus entered on Palm Sunday, because I would think 99% of what I've ever seen in any kind of literature is that Jesus, that's a pretty established fact. And so this will be the first day of Passion Week. Now let's count. If Jesus entered the city of Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, Sunday's the first day, Monday's the second, Tuesday's the third, Wednesday's the fourth, Thursday's the 5th day of the week, Friday's the 6th, and Saturday's the 7th. That would make Easter Sunday the 8th day, or the beginning of the second week. So let's count the days of the second week. You have Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Sunday, the 8th day, begins a third week, and I have labeled that as a new section. Now I recognize that this may or may not be what John had in mind, but at the minimum, this outline can help us more easily separate where things are happening, when things are happening, and it may help us to remember how the Gospel of John is organized. I'm always trying to figure out an easy way to remember things and to communicate things, but sometimes to get there, you have to do some complicated work, and then you have to boil it down to as simple as you can. And so we have to remember that the number 8 in the Bible is quite significant, because it is a symbol of a new beginning. And so when you see that he's talking about the 8th day in this third section, that should be a clue that something's changing. So, because if you look in the Old Testament, the 8th day was quite significant. When Abraham was called by God and God cut a covenant with Abraham, God told Abraham to circumcise his son in Genesis 17:12 on the 8th day. It says, he who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations. He who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. Everybody had to be circumcised, all the males. And you may recall that Noah's family, which survived the flood, numbered 8. 1 Peter chapter 3:20 says, who formerly were disobedient when once the divine long suffering waited in the days of Noah while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 souls, were saved through water. So the number 8 stands out in the rest of the Bible. Therefore, it's not a stretch of the imagination to think that it has some significance in the Gospel of John, especially in light of the fact that he does a lot of 7s. It kind of makes me feel like I'm on Sesame Street. You know, remember 7, 7, 7, 7? I love 7. Now he's doing 8. That change says that John's got something in his mind, and that's where we'll pick it up next week. If this lessons have helped you, please share it with a friend, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or check out our live podcast on either Apple or Spotify. I hope to see you next week.